In today's episode, we talk with Aleksandra Nakuma, who has been a friend of mine for years. And until we sat down for this podcast and dove into a deep conversation, I didn't know so much about her life. And I wanted to share it with you as it's one of the most inspiring conversations and stories I've heard about really building a sense of self acceptance and love for yourself after really difficult times. So we talk about how she grew up in Russia and then at the age of 5 moved to Slovenia. And she shares how the truly unconditional love of her family at that early age gave her a foundation that sustained her through some of life's darkest moments for about 2 decades after that. So this episode is really beautiful if you're ready to learn how to find strength and courage within and grace to deal with some of life's hardest challenges. So enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Shift Your Vibe to Thrive podcast. My name is Emily Evans Russell, and I'm a single mom, multiple six-figure business owner, and master mindset and energy coach. I created this podcast with 2 main targets. 1, to give you practical tools so that no matter where you are in your life right now, you not only know that things can shift, but you know how to make them greater. And 2, to change your frequency so that you become an energetic match for everything you desire. I'm talking your relationships, your finances, your success, all of it. Think of this podcast as your weekly energetic upgrade with a mix of subconscious mind hacks, ways to quantum leap, and consciousness shifts. A place where you learn to sculpt your reality and actually finally truly have the magical life you deserve and one that works for uniquely you. Are you ready to uplevel your reality? I think I hear yes, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for being here. And now let's go to the show. Okay, so as usual, I hit record too late because we started talking, Aleksandra and I, before I hit record. So I'm going to make her rewind so you all listening can hear a bit of the beginning. So we were talking about when you were younger, you were a hurdler and a runner. And I think we were talking about injuries, stuff like awarenesses we get about our bodies. So will you rewind us to that?
Yes.
Let's start with that story.
I'm actually going to start even before that. I'm going to start at the beginning. So I'm mixed race. My mom is white and my biological father is Black, African from Nigeria. So I was born mixed race in Russia. So in Russia, which is a very interesting choice, but then with, how life, so basically, okay, I was born in Russia and, Russia is was and still is a predominantly white population. White people are predominantly living there. So there was, I always say that my mom is like a revolutionary person, because even though.
Is your mom Russian?
Yeah, my mom is Russian.
Okay.
My mom is Russian, totally Russian. But revolutionary because even though there was some kind of agreement with Russia and countries of third world. So, my biological father, he was studying medicine. He was doing his doctorate thesis in medicine. And my mom is a doctor, so she was finishing, diploma or whatever to become a doctor. So they met there. But what I wanted to say is that even though there were some Black people, for a white person to actually date a Black person, for real, getting married and all that was huge. And the backlash of people, but people that you don't even know, everyone has opinion. Everyone has opinion. So there were a lot of opinions, but my mom is very stubborn. And she also knows what she wants. And she follows that in this really weird, magical way, but she followed it to a T. So, she got married, she had me. And I was very, very lucky that I was surrounded with, my grandma, my grandpa, and my uncle, which all of them are deceased already. But they created such, if you seek a definition of a family, I would think that this is a place where you really can be yourself. So people don't judge you, and they really see the best in you. They see all of you, but they kind of emphasize on what is the best in you. And I was really lucky and fortunate, even though I had like this weird come into the world, since like my father left us. So it was just me and my mom. So even though there was like this kind of a strange entrance, being like, just coming to my mom, I landed extremely softly. Even though I landed to a country like Russia that was predominantly white, like Soviet Union fell apart a little bit before that. So even though like circumstances were harsh, I had an extremely soft landing. Like my family, my grandma, my grandpa, and my uncle, especially my grandma and my grandpa, they were in love with me, like totally. They worshiped the ground I was walking upon. Like that, I think, like truly, and they instilled so much love and trust and kindness and caring and just this outwardly admiration. My mom used to say that when my grandpa, when he looked at me, like when I was a baby, he was just shaking. He couldn't contain himself. He was just like, I love you so much. You're like the best thing, And it was so funny because if you look at it, those are people that grew up in war. So there is like this level of guard, you're on guard. And even Russia at that time was very like guarded country. Even now, maybe we know, it's not an open country in a way. Oh, everyone will just share everything, their views. It's not like that. And at that time, it was like also quite guarded. But he was he had so much love. And it's almost like I was that some kind of a portal through which he could truly express. And we know babies, we don't judge. We're just like they're just like bundles of joy and cry oftentimes. But he was like he found this kind of a vessel in me to really pour all this love that he had, and he couldn't find another outlet to really pour it in. But okay, then he died when I was like 3, so 2 or 3. So it was quite devastating. But my grandma, she, even before, she had a very significant role. But after that, it was me and her, because my mom, she had to provide, she had to work like multiple jobs. My mom is like the best. Like she is truly a Wonder Woman. But my grandma, she was like an angel. Like, I kid you not, she was like an angel. And she had enough firmness in a way of setting boundaries, but also this unconditional love and total explanation for everything. Like if I was not allowed something, there was an explanation in a way that I got it. It was not like, you cannot do that. She was just, and she was always there. Like she was always there. And always, it's interesting, I think everyone is different, but some of us are like a bit more different, especially like when you look different, it adds to the layer of difference, and you're like, especially when you're young, you don't get it. Like, I think even, I don't know where I read that, but kids, I don't know till which age, they don't really see themselves as different. They just see them as themselves. I didn't really get I was different, even though I was getting all those different projections and energies and points of views. I didn't really get I was different. I just knew I was loved, and I knew I'm okay. I knew that. I knew for in my formative years, like from 1 to 5, I knew there's nothing wrong with me, even though like I could have like blips and tidbits and like small fractions of people looking at me differently, but I didn't like, I had such a vast cushion of love that I just didn't like, it didn't go through. I knew that I'm okay. It was not like, oh my God, I'm the best, but I was just like, that's not even like an avenue of thinking that you go to. If you're okay with yourself and people that surround you, that they love you through everything. And you don't even go thinking, am I good? Am I bad? Am I like, I was just like, I'm loved. That's it. I'm like, I don't, people that I actually really care about, they love me. And that's all. That's all I really require. It's funny now that I think about it, it's like how much this kindness and love, what kind of a sustenance it is for a person, you
Yeah.
know.
And
And
imagine, I know as you go on with your story and as we grow up, it's like we come out, like how lucky are you to have that like
yes,
cushion, a bubble.
yes,
But it's like remembering back, it's like all of us are looking to remember back that what's actually true of there's nothing
yes,
wrong with me. I'm loved.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Wow.
yes. So that was, and it's almost like, life or universe was preparing me for what was to come, because I required to have this vast, like, reserves into, I had to had a place and space to land upon. I didn't even know. I mean, at that time you don't know,
No.
I mean, you don't really get it. But I really require that, because otherwise, like, my life could have gone on a very different dark path. But anyways, so what occurred then? So I grew up in Russia till I was five, and then my mom fell in love. It's also like an interesting story, So my biological dad, he left us and literally disappeared. He literally disappeared into thin air. Well, some men are like that. And also, like, culture, like, Emily, you're from US, I live in Europe, like in Slovenia now. And in Europe and in US, if a father leaves you, it's like, how the fuck is this possible? There's something wrong with this man. But I don't really know Africa a lot, but from what I've heard, from what I had, like, different conversations, it can be more common. I will not say it's normal, but it can be more common, especially in that time. It was kind of, they thought, like, especially people that came to different countries, they came some as a refugee, not necessarily someone that's without anything, but also like a political refugee, or like a student or something. I don't think it was in their mindset, this, like, point of view or idea, oh, I'm gonna stay and, like, grow roots. Like, here in Europe, there is this notion of, I'm staying here, I'm growing roots, I want to, like, build a life. I think it's not like, that's not the case. At least it was not the case in that story.
Dad. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, my mom fell in love with with her current husband, and we left Russia when I was 5, a little bit less than 5. And you know what is interesting? Like, just to kind of put in a little bit of magical weaving, and how people create. So my mom, even though, born and raised and, like, did everything, became a doctor, had, like, a career and everything in Russia, she always felt very different. And when she was 20 something, she went to a psychic, and she always had this sense that she will not stay in Russia, but she was just, like, restless. We are, like, I'm also, like, really restless. I'm always like, oh, what's to the next? Da, da, da. And she also had this restlessness in her. So she went to a psychic with, like, a bunch of friends, and the psychic told her that she will leave Russia at one point, and she will move to a country that will also speak, like, a language that has, like, it comes from a similar language family. So living in Slovenia, it's not same, but it's a similar language family. And we ended up in Slovenia. It was, like, a very interesting, story, but I'm not going to go, like, in depth in my mom's story. But anyways, she fell in love. Quite literally, love found her. It came to her. She did not go anywhere and seek it, like, actively, in a way, but it came to her work, to her doorstep. She fell in love. She got pregnant, and we moved from Russia to Slovenia. And I oftentimes kid, because Nigeria is, like, a huge country. Russia is a huge country. And Slovenia is one of the smallest countries in the whole. Only 2 million people. It's gorgeous. It's really beautiful, like, peaceful, pristine, amazing nature and everything. But it's tiny. It's really tiny. So somehow, from, like, 2 massive countries, I ended up in one of the smallest ones. So we moved, and Slovenia at that point, it was just like after a war, there's some kind of a war ended like in Yugoslavia, like countries, fell apart, formed, different agreements and everything. And when we were leaving, my grandma, she was very anxious because, as I said, Russia is huge, Slovenia is really small. So in a neighbor country, there was war. And my grandma was like, why in the world are you going to a war zone? Like, why? And then, people explained to her it's not actually that country. It's a neighboring country. But it was just like, I think, you know what? Love can make you stupid. Like when you're in love, you can make very stupid choices. That sometimes they, show up as, oh, there's something way better, down the line. But sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. We just choose out of a blindness,
Yeah.
you know? So basically we moved, and that's when the really hard period of my life started. And from year 5 till 25, I was just drowning mostly, truly mostly drowning, always being on the verge of, I don't really want to be here. But it also so many experiences that confirmed that. So we moved here, and there was a lot of racism. There was a lot of just tension and, small mindedness, just like a lot of, abuse, however I turn it, from the smallest particle to the biggest, from whatever I previously have known what family is. I came to a very different landscape, from a place where everyone was quite literally worshiping me, to a place where, so my mom had, I have a brother, like a younger brother. And all of a sudden, I mean, and looking now for years now, because I work a lot on myself, I don't really have, like grief about it or hold grudges or regrets. But there were a lot of things that were just like not kind, far from it, But I also get it because, can you imagine like moving? So my mom's husband, he went to Russia. He came back and he just said to his family, so basically I'm bringing a soon to be wife with me. She's pregnant, and she also has another child. And then her child is mixed race. She is black, half black. And that was like, it was such a black spot on the place that because it's such an extreme, like imagine, I live in an extremely small country. It's almost everyone knows each other. And we moved to an even smaller town. And in that town, the family that we moved with or to was quite well known. And like the surroundings, like they had a lot of ideas about them, who are they supposed to be, like even like for my mom's husband, who is he supposed to be with, and like everything. It's so wild because if you live in a bigger place, a bigger country or bigger city, things don't really get that personal because you're like, I don't know that person. If you live in a city of 30 million, you don't really care. You know that you might never see that person again. There might be universe colliding, but you might never see that person again. Yeah. But in a town of 20,000 people, everyone knows each other. Yeah.
And you stand out just a little bit.
Exactly. Wow. So I came there, and all of a sudden I didn't really have, like, my mom started working because she again had to provide because whatever situation. She had another baby, and all of a sudden, like, I was just left alone. She had another baby. She had to like take care of that other baby for my brother. Her husband is like, I think he was not really ready to be a dad, like what this entails. So he was like living his life, and she was, just working. And me, even at the really young age, at like 5.5, 6, I had that like really deep knowing that I have to take care of her. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to bring home money, but energetically, like now that I know, I was always taking care of her in like various ways. But it left me feeling very isolated and alone because all of a sudden I didn't have my grandma. I didn't have like this soft space to land. I didn't have a place to come to and someone would embrace me and say, hey, it's okay. Whatever you're going through, do you want to talk about it? And if you don't, I'm just going to hug you and just know that, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. All of a sudden, everything was like just cut off. I didn't have like anywhere to go. And there were constant attacks on me. Whatever, like the way I got it, like at that point, I started really acknowledging, okay, so I'm different. And like my body is different. I look different. At that point, that was my like point of view. So my body is different. And then like the next step from that being different was, so something is wrong with me. Because if I would be okay, people would not attack me out of nowhere. Because it happened, like I was walking with like a family member, and all of a sudden there was like this guy in front of us. And I was like 6 years old, and he stopped us and he looked towards me, and she was holding me by her hand, and he pointed a finger at me and started screaming like, take this child from wherever you brought it. This is not a place for her to be. I had like those kind of like really out there racist attacks. Yeah. That was like first one. And then I had like even like bigger one. I went to kindergarten, and my teacher, how do you call them? Like, people that work as, teachers. She was also pretty racist. Or I don't like, I don't really like using the word racist because there are a lot of other things that people go through, and like this, hate they have towards certain people and energies. But she was racist. And she was just like on me. She was like, I hate this child. And if you look at pictures of me in kindergarten, if you look into my eyes, you're like, this is an old woman. Like my eyes are like an eyes of an 80-year-old, just like really bad shit. But it was bad because like, so my, confidence or whatever really like dwindled. And there was like one attack after another, and there was like no safe space to actually go to. Because if you imagine, like, she was so vicious that she humiliated me constantly in front of like the whole class. And she tried to prove that I am like mentally, like that I'm like disabled in a way, that I'm like stupid or whatever. And she made me take like psychological and I don't know what kind of tests when I was like 6 years old, because she was like, no, she's disabled. She cannot go to normal school. It was that bad. It was that bad.
Whoa.
But at that point, and there was another, so my mom, speaking Russian, there's a language barrier. So another thing. And at that point, my grandma here, like mom of my mom's husband, she saw me crying hysterically, one day, and she's like, that's not normal. What's going on? And I told her like that I'm experiencing this abuse in kindergarten. And she's like, this is not okay. I have to we have to take care of this. So she went there and she had a really stern talk. And, that teacher, she tried to just deny. She was like, she's lying. And she's like, why would a 6-year-old kid lie in such great detail? How could she? Like, really?
Yeah.
So, they came to some kind of agreement that she will just kind of leave me alone. That did not happen. That did not happen. And well, basically I did, I still went to school. I did the test. I did prove in early tender age of 6 that my brain does work normally, differently, but normally. So I went to school, and a year after all of this, because there were like more teachers and they saw what was happening, but they didn't react in whatever sense.
Yeah.
So a year after, one of those teachers, not the one that I was perpetrating abuse, but one of those teachers actually came to my home and apologized. A year after. She came to my home and apologized, which, you know, good of her. But anyways, all of those things, it really like there were such big digs into like this foundation of who I was, you know, who I thought I was. Because all of a sudden, you know, starting like elementary school, I was below zero, you know. And my mom, I remember my mom was like really concerned because she was like, man, if she walks into another situation like that, I don't know if she can like go through this, you know, which was true. If I would go into another of those kind of situations, I don't know if I would like, you know, walk out of it. But it's interesting because universe always delivers, you know. If like there is always something or someone having your back. I think every one of us has, you know, we can call like guardian angels, or we have some kind of support. Like when there's really this time of need, we have this support system. They just come out of somewhere. So I started elementary school, and I find that I had a teacher that was like such an amazing teacher. Like, you know, she was so amazing. She was a little bit like my grandma, you know, very kind, very like considerate, very supportive, very, you know, sees the best in you, encourages you. So I really had that, you know, that like a bit more of drive. So I could kind of start slowly coming out of this constant shell of, you know, oh my God, another attack, another attack. But it was interesting because there was a constant attack at that point on my body, you know, on the way I look. People attacked me. Now, you know, there's a different, like a bigger conversation because you are all these energies, but the way people perceived me was just based on body. You know, because we can, you know, and we both know there's like, you're not just a body or a being. There's a lot more going on, but majority of people don't function from that awareness. No. They're not like, why when they look at someone, they look at their body, and even if there's something that's triggering in that person, they will attack their body. They will attack, oh, I hate how you look. I mean, if we look at I'm gonna just say like more women, men also, but more women, you know, a lot of women, when they look at themselves in the mirror, they're like, oh, I hate how I look. Oh, I wish I would look like different. You know, if we would be educated in a different awareness of, look, maybe there is something else. Maybe it's not like a wrinkle or, you know, a zit. Maybe it's something else. Then maybe there's another energy that has nothing to do directly with your body, but it's showing up like you can see it through your body. But maybe there's something else going on. You know, but there's like this such a missing piece of education.
Huge missing. I mean, when you say that, and I hear you are this little girl constantly being judged just for how you look, and that it's so different in that country.
Yeah.
I used to teach biology, and I remember learning this fact that on one hillside with a group of, and I don't remember if it was gorillas or chimpanzees, but if you took all of their DNA in just one hillside, like one group, they have more genetic diversity than our entire human race. But to us, they all look the same. So we're all very similar, but we show a lot of physical differences, skin color, shape, body type.
Yeah.
And then we've made that so significant.
Yeah.
None of it is,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It fascinated me because I thought, wow, we've created all this division, all this hate and all this thing based on something that is just a physical presentation of an underlying biology that's very similar. And then our energies are so different, but no one's looking at that. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, that's such a, I mean, can you imagine if all of a sudden, like, we would wake up in a world where this, like, just, there are a lot of missing pieces, but just this missing piece would be all of a sudden there. And people will be like, oh, there's not just a body thing, there's something else going on. If people would implement just this small awareness, it would start this huge avalanche of change, because all of a sudden you cannot see yourself the way you were taught.
Yeah.
At that point, you know, I was also like, I was taught based on the best of abilities of my mom and my grandma and my grandpa and, the family and society. Like, I was taught a story about this is who you are and you look like this. And based on this environment and what we know, what we were taught about people of your kind, I'm going to air quote it, of your kind, we will treat you in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I started with elementary school. And again, there were almost no Black people in Slovenia at that point. And there were people from other like countries from the Balkan area, like Bosnia and Croatia, but mostly Bosnia. And I don't know why exactly, like based on a lot of history and a lot of, I guess bad blood and bad memories and, and situations that went on among those countries. There's a lot of hate. There was a lot of hate. There still is like the simmering thing, but so because they didn't really they called me, like, I think I can say it because I'm half Black, but they called me like an equivalent of a nigger, they called me that. But because they really didn't know what else to call me, they called me like a Bosnian. They said, oh, you're a Bosniak person, just because they knew that's a bad thing to say, which is weird because it's just like you just name a whole nation, from Bosnia. So, but that's the hate that was coming out of them. And it was like, it's going to be directed to you. You are something that's triggering this hate. So for first few years in elementary school, it was like quite bad, even though I had like an amazing teacher and there was like this a little bit of an anchor, and started coming to myself, let's say it like this. But I had a lot of attacks based on, the body. And I was very, very skinny, just like skin and bones and a little bit of muscle, like dangly little creature, big hair. I hated at that point in my whole elementary school, I think, till I was, in like 15, I hated the way I looked. I really hated the way I looked. So basically, in translation, I hated my body. I really hated my body. I used to look at my schoolmates, and now that I look at the situation, I'm like, oh my God, but I used to look at my schoolmates that had like a better status, or they, I don't know, like had a bigger group of friends, all those things that young kids and teenagers are making important. And I used to pray, oh my God, can I be just like them? Can I like have straight hair? Can I have like straight nose? Can I have smaller lips? Now if I would hear myself asking for smaller lips, I mean, or like straight hair, I'm like, girl, come on.
Everybody else is like injecting things to make them bigger. You're like, oh my God. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's funny how things just, it's wild. This like, even like this hate, or like, it's so wild. It's so wild. Like when you look at them, like, why would you hate something? And then at the same time, like exactly same time, try to do it on your face. If you look at like people hate, let's say, if we see racism, they hate like Black people have fuller lips. It's just like, genetics. And then you may hate that. And on the other side, but now there's like everyone all around the world, there's like, lip fillers. And I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? But see, again, we are at that missing piece of, it's not about the body. But anyways, in my second grade, I was like really dangly, and my mom's husband was a coach, like an athletics coach, track and field. And they kind of, they were like, you have to start doing something, like some kind of sports. And I'm like, okay. But every time I went, I cried, because it was just another like situation and a place where I had to be with another like group of kids, and the kids like did not necessarily like me. In majority, there were always like one, two, they were like, oh, I kind of like you. But majority was always like, when you hear a rumor and then you're just like, yeah, that person. They don't know you, but they just heard a rumor about, oh, she came from somewhere. And to this day, Emily, I kid you not. So I was not adopted. I have like, my mom was the one that, gave birth to me. But till this day, people in this town that even like know my story or whatever, or they just think they know, or they heard something. A lot of people still think I'm adopted.
Wow.
It's just to emphasize the disease of having a point of view, a fixed point of view, and not actually asking questions and not being curious about
Being curious.
the world. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I started going on this like, sports practice. It was athletics at that time. And I didn't like it because I was just like, I couldn't even like move properly. If you have muscle on your body, you're like, you have this kind of like fluidity of movement. But I was so skinny. Like I went to a competition, and it's interesting because I started like I start training a little bit, going to competitions.
And you're
like
like 8 or
yeah,
9?
yeah, I was 8, 9. So I started going in competitions, and I still remember I mean, I'm at that age that it was not like a necessity to have spikes,
Yeah.
when you run in spikes when you're so young. So I ran barefoot.
Oh my gosh.
I ran barefoot, but I still remember I was running 200 meters, and I mean, I'm laughing now, but at that point I was crying. I was legit crying. I was running 200 meters, and I used to cry. I cried on the way, in the race, I cried because I like, so when you run 200 meters, you have to like go into a curve, when you like run. And that's like, if you have muscle and you're strong, that's the best part. Because when you go out of the curve, you just like, bam, you just like, you are like an arrow. But when you are like nothing, when you are just like skin and bones, I almost couldn't keep myself in the lane. And if you're not in the lane, you're disqualified. So I used to cry. I cried all in the race because I used all my energy to keep myself in the lane, that I wouldn't be, just like thrown out of the lane
from the force of taking a corner.
It was so bad. It was so bad. It was so bad. So, another layer of there's everything wrong with you. There's like nothing is going for you. So my looks were criticized. My physique was like proven not like, it was not okay, not okay. I had my mom had to, there were doctors calling her for, meetings. Thank God for my mom, and, she's a doctor and all that, because they were like, your child is too skinny. They tried to really instill in her, she's too skinny. She has to like, grow something. But mama was like, she has a normal appetite. That's her body structure. Just let her be. So, but then something happened that totally turned the tide. So I was at home, in like wherever we lived, and I was playing with two of my neighbors, and we were playing with a ball, with like, just like something, throwing ball. And there was like this grassy hill, behind the house where we were playing. So we were throwing this ball, and then someone threw the ball, and my family, they were all like outside, chatting, top, whatever. And someone threw this ball, and I was like, oh, ball, and the ball flew like down that hill. And in my mind was just like, oh, I have to go get that ball, And I just started running down that hill, which, if you are like very light, as I was at that point, if given the right circumstances, like downhill, you can just fly essentially, So I was like after that ball, and that was the first time in my life, like in that, after like I kind of started being aware of myself, that I really felt free in my body, because I was running after that ball, and it was just this feeling of, oh my God, I'm flying. And I had that sense, I'm actually good at this. Like, I actually can run. I can run. I just like have to find a right place to run, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, like this just sheer freedom. It was just like, oh my God, like just this exuberance. And I catch the ball before it like even like landed down there, because I guess there was some kind of superpowers, in that.
Yeah.
Anyways, I catch the ball and I like start, walking upstairs, and I see like all of the family members gawking, and I was like, what, and then my mom's husband, it was so interesting because he actually never said that before, but he turned to my mom and he's like, see, I told you she had talent. I told you. He never did. Prior to that, never. But he had in mind this, like Black people, they are supposed to be sprinters, like there is something in their like genetic makeup that they were born to run. And it's true. But at that point, he was like, I see a talent in you. Okay, we're going to work on that. And anyways, this is how I like started, I started like training more seriously. And in a year or so, I was just like dominating. I was like really good,
Wow.
I started becoming really good. And it was interesting because in my life, I had like a couple of those moments where it was wild in a way. When we talk about changing, and especially changing your perspective or changing different things in your life, we have this, it's not necessarily, it doesn't often happen overnight. Some things do, but big things don't happen overnight. But for me, when it came to my body, like really like in a severe way, I experienced many changes literally overnight. Yeah. So I started like all of a sudden, I went running. I was like nothing and no one, like the baddest whatever. They saw me running. All of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, you will have talent. Yes, I see it in you. You're like overnight. It was like one moment.
Did it change how the friends in the school?
Yeah, how like especially like family that we moved into, it changed. I cannot even tell you how drastically, but all of a sudden it was just like, you are worthy now. And do you know how much it means to a child to all of a sudden you're like, oh, so like this is it. So I started training and, I started like having success, and then everything just, it's so wild, weird how people function. Because I started having success based on the body that everyone judged, like something's wrong with you. I started having success, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, see, that's that girl, she's successful. Like I went to a competition, like, oh yeah, she won, whatever. It was just like overnight. But I credit sports for it built me, not based on people, but just sports and like the sheer choice of really like being a sportsman, and everything that comes with it. Mm-hmm. It built me to my core, and especially like the relationship with my body. It strengthened me in such profound ways. Yeah. Really in profound ways. So I was an athlete till I was 18, I think. And then I was like, no, I mean, I had injuries towards the end, because I was like, that's not it, and my body was like, no. I've seen like, because I've grown up.
What were your races like when you were in high school?
Oh, I ran hurdles.
Straight hurdles, like 100, 200 meter.
Yes. Hurdles. The thing was, no, there's also an interesting story. So I started, and because I was so light, first I started with a long jump when I was like like a child, like a kid still. I was a long jumper, and then there was like, oh, you're good at this, And then we were on one training and we were running hurdles, and I didn't get how the hell to run hurdles. I was running hurdles the opposite way. Your first leg goes straight and the second one goes like, cross. I ran first leg cross and the second leg kind of, I just didn't like, my brain was just like, I just didn't get it. I was just like, everyone was running. I'm like, why the fuck am I not getting this? I'm just not getting this. And then right before like really giving up, I'm like, I don't really get this, And then something clicked, and I ran like this perfect technique. And again, we were all like, what, how is it, like, what? And I was really good at it. I was like really, and I loved running hurdles because it taught me about like sprinting hurdles or like running 100 meters, 200 meters. It teaches you presence in a really different way, like in a really precise way. Because you're like, if you don't start well, if you fuck it up on the start, you're done. Like, whatever. It just like, no, no. But then it's also, you know what? Like hurdles, it teaches you to find your rhythm. You have to find your rhythm. And like talking about it now, it's so profound because even in life, finding your own rhythm, it's like the thing. But hurdles really, it teaches you how to find your own, and you have to have your own rhythm because it's so important to find your rhythm. And it also teaches you that you cannot fly over a hurdle. You have to run over a hurdle. So it's almost like you have to kill a hurdle. Like you have to attack the hurdle. And it's same as in life, You cannot, like, if you jump, you'll just lose time.
Yeah. And if you have fear of them, like it's so funny listening
Exactly.
to you, because I was a track a track runner,
Yeah.
but more cross country because I was the slow long distance girl because I used to have nightmares about someone with your body type, like the really long legs and the fast sprinter. Of course, you always want to be what you're not good at, right? So I was like, sprinting seems so fun. It's this powerful, like go fast and you're done with your race, and and I used to have nightmares that I'd be on the starting line and I'd look to my left and I'd look to my right and all I would see were legs because everyone else's legs were so long, because I had this thing of like my legs were so short and I had to take so many more steps. And I remember trying to do hurdles because there was the 400-meter hurdles and I would run the 400 and all the longer stuff, right? But that was the shortest race. And they're like, why don't you try the hurdles? And I'm so short, like me trying, I had to jump. I couldn't run over them. So you have to jump over them. And if you had any fear and didn't go in with that, I know I can do this, you were wiping out.
Exactly. Like exactly. This is what, like, especially like hurdles, like that, discipline, it teaches you have to, like, I was taught, and I think it's a really good, like, kind of a story, but the way an explanation, because I was taught that you have to kill the hurdle below you. There has to be like no fear. You have to really destroy it. And it gave me a lot of, man, really, like, sports gave me so much, Like I don't think about it in today, like in day-to-day life, but now when I'm talking with you, I'm just like, yep.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear you talk about, and maybe this is the direction you're going with the story, but we chatted for a bit before we got on, and you said I didn't realize it at the time, but running was such a meditative
Yes.
practice. Because what I noticed too is I didn't notice that at the time, but as a long distance runner, I'd go out for 5, 10-mile, 15-mile runs in college, and I remember just going, you just get into a rhythm, like you said, you're just in the flow, and it was so, I didn't realize that at the time it was a type of meditation. I think a lot of runners tell you the same thing. And then when you don't have that in your life anymore and you didn't realize that was giving it to you.
Yes. Like movement is essential for embodiment because everything moves in the body all the time. But if you don't move with your body, you just lose the connection. Yeah. So when I quit professional, when I was 18, because as I said, I don't see myself going down that path.
As like a career.
As a career. Yeah. I was like, no, I just no. And for 2-3 years, like my body was kind of spent, even though I was like really young, but I had like quite bad injuries. And I was just like, I hated anything about movement. If someone would say, hey, do you want to go like run or something? I'm like, no. Hey, do you want to go like to a class? No. So for like maybe not 3 years, but a year, 2 years, I didn't like do anything. I was just resting. Well, I was studying, but I was just like resting. I hated whatever a mention of a word. Sports was just like, fuck off.
Wow.
Like, no, nothing. But then I started having like, like mental issues. I didn't know again at that point about awareness, but I had like, even when I was growing up, and now telling about this story, I think for a lot of people it will make sense, like where from all this hatred and like abuse, I had a lot of depression even when I was like a teenager. I had a lot of suicidal notions, and thoughts, and like I was just like constantly, even though I was like training and all that, I had a lot of really bad moments because my worth was tied to success in track and field, like in
that's why you were a good kid all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah. I was constantly more in a bad space than in a good space. But when I stopped, all of a sudden, I was just constantly attacked like by my thoughts. I was just like, I couldn't like live properly. And, at that point I was studying there, we start like experimenting with drinking, and, I was never in drugs. So that's like a kind of a blessing that I was always very afraid of drugs. So I was like, yeah, whatever, this is not for me. But, when you're like 19, 20, you just go on I went in a completely different route till before, because I was like, I have to live now. I didn't have a normal teenage life, when people are like.
Start modeling at that time?
Yes. I started modeling also. So I jumped from having like really being connected with my body. Wow. I jumped into this world where being criticized for the way you look is the thing. And all of a sudden, even like I had a very beautiful body, like all like perfect sports shape, muscular, not too much, but just like beautiful body. But it was not right for modeling business. Even like my face there was like, if someone that's a model will listen to this, there's always something wrong with your body. It's what industry is based on. It's how industries are created today, a beauty industry. There's always something, look at that person, she has this better. There's always this notion of something is a little bit wrong with you. But modeling is like, it's a business that thrives on, well, that kind of a discrimination, essentially.
Yeah.
And again, we still have to take a notion, I am a mixed race. And even today, when we look at models, majority of models are still sadly white. There are like more and more different races, thank God, but predominantly it's mostly white bodies. And that was like, again, a constant, even though like I worked some, then I traveled, I went to Paris and London and Amsterdam, and I worked like in Slovenia quite a bit. So I worked around, but I went to Istanbul. But the thing was that I was creating that I really had need, because I still really believe that I'm ugly. And I believe that if I'm going to become a model, then the tides will turn. And all of a sudden I will be, and again, this thing, I had to believe that, so I will be worthy of love and, I don't know, relationship. And I had like all those really interesting stories just playing, if I will be a model, then I will have everything. Like, and I didn't know what that everything is, but I had a conviction of I'll have everything, whatever that everything is.
And we will take a pause here in Aleksandra's story and be back next week with part 2. I hope you got something out of that episode. If you like this podcast, please share it with someone you know who would find it useful or interesting, and subscribe so that you can listen to past and upcoming shows.